Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude, guest host of this program. Hawaii for Palestine is the topic for today. And we have people from Students and Faculty for Justice in Palestine. This is Cynthia Franklin. She's a professor of English at UH Mānoa. We have Ihilani Lasconia, also from SFJP, and she is a PhD student in political science. I should say that she was an undergrad in the Department of Ethnic Studies. Yeah, so thank you for coming. We have Laila Popata. She's from Maui for Palestine. And we have Jessica Nakamura, also founding member of Maui for Palestine. We will talk also about other Kauai for Palestine, Hawaii for Palestine, because you are connected with those two, so you might want to mention those. Okay, so let's start with Laila. Laila, tell us more about you and how you became involved in the struggle for Palestine.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Laila Popata, and I've been on Maui for 20 years. And I am my mother and my uncle and my grandparents were displaced from Palestine during the Nakba. And so I grew up my whole life learning about what had happened to my people and just my grandparents mourning the loss of their country. And so that was just always something I carried with me, you know, this idea of the old country and this deep sense of loss and sorrow. But what's happened in Gaza in the last 10 months, this is really what has politically activated me. I think I always knew, you know, that what had happened to the Palestinians was totally wrong and the injustice was, you know, horrific. But I was just never moved to get politically active. And then after what happened in Gaza, October 7th, I just started at the beginning, I almost didn't want to know what was going to happen, what was the retaliation. And it took me about 2 weeks. And then once I started watching what was happening and, you know, listening to the news and seeing these posts on Instagram, I was just immediately involved. And I just couldn't stop thinking about Gaza, couldn't stop thinking about what was happening there. And then I heard about a rally at the end of November, that there was going to be a rally in Maui. And a friend had told me she had saw a poster. So she said, you know, I know you're Palestinian, there's going to be a rally. And so I live up country and just, you know, driving down the Haleakala Highway. And I was driving down and to see the Palestinian flag flying in the wind there on Maui soil, it was just like such a moving moment for me. And then I found some people who felt as strongly about this cause as I did. And then I've been involved with Maui for Palestine since then. And I do so with just a great sense of responsibility that I feel like I have to be involved. So thank you for having me.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Ihilani, how about you?
Aloha mai kako, ova o Ihilani Lasconia, no Waimanalo mai o. Aloha, Ihilani, or he's fine from Waimanalo, and I got involved in really fighting for Palestine and understanding that fighting for Palestine is inseparable to fighting for the deoccupation of Hawaiʻi. Due to really amazing kumu in ethnic studies, you, Kumu Ibrahim, were foundational to that understanding. Being a part of ethnic studies, but also this awesome program, Nā Ko'oko'o, a Native Hawaiian leadership program by Noelani Goodyear Ka'opua, where we talked about Palestine in class. So being an undergraduate, fresh out of high school, and learning about Hawaiian sovereignty, but always learning about the history of Palestine in those conversations is what brought me here today. I've been with SFJP at UH for 7 years now, which is, I can't believe that. But yeah, and thank you to amazing kumu like Cindy Franklin here today as well, who have always been incredible mentors and people at UH. Yeah. Mahalo.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Jessica Nakamura, please go ahead.
Yes, mahalo, aloha. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I first learned about the Palestinian struggle when I was attending school at California Institute of Integral Studies from 2017 to 2018. They have a very progressive program with a liberatory lens that includes global studies. So one of the assigned readings that we had was Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Davis. And she makes the very clear connections between racialized oppression and violence against Palestinians in Palestine and also Black Americans in the United States. We also had excerpts from a reading, Palestine Speaks. That's compiled by Kate Malek and Mateo Hoke. And for me, that was like a very much a wake-up call to hear from Palestinians in their own voices the experience that they have been enduring for many years. So after that, I started following some Palestinian accounts on social media, like Eye on Palestine. But kind of similar to Laila's story, I didn't get involved in activism to the extent that I am now until this past October. I think just it's very hard as a human being not to become radicalized by the things that we've been seeing. It just very much motivated me to get out on the streets and to start advocating and to do everything that I can. Very happy to have met Laila and to be involved with our group.
Yeah, wonderful. And Cynthia Franklin, Cindy, we call you. She's the dynamo behind a lot of stuff, domestic, I mean, local and national and international, I might add. So please, Cindy.
Thanks so much for having me, and great to be in such great company. I think that I've been teaching at the University of Hawai'i since 1994. I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area on Ohlone land and grew up in a Jewish default Zionist home. And being in Hawaii and learning about settler colonialism here as a settler was really important to my investments in Palestine and understanding the connection between these two sites of occupation and settler colonialism. Another kind of starting point for me happened about 12 or 13 years ago, where I came up in that kind of violent encounter with how to be anti-Zionist was to be perceived of as anti-Semitic, and to kind of speak on behalf of Palestinians was seen as an assault on Jewish life. And that was something that I was a little taken aback by. Now it's just like, well, duh. Of course, that's the Zionist response. But I think that got me involved in Palestine. I went to Palestine in 2013 as part of a faculty development seminar. One of the projects I went there wanting to do was a special issue, which I worked on with Ibrahim and Morgan Cooper in Ramallah. And working on that special issue was really important for me insofar as the 2014 war on Gaza was underway and affecting directly a lot of our contributors. At that point, I also became involved in the U.S. campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel as a steering committee member, and also founded Students and Faculty for Justice in Palestine at that time.
Yeah, wonderful. I would like to go to the first segment. We interviewed some people from Oahu and also from Maui. We start with Keone Rodriguez's segment. It's about how he got involved and all of that.
In college, I was involved, there's kind of a very small activist community where I went. I was also in the Bay Area, like Alicia. I was at Stanford, and one of the things that I was first involved with as an organizer was when Mānoaʻs, the sort of most recent conflict around Maui occurred in the summer of 2019, 2019. 2019. And to see the activists at Stanford, most of whom are non-Hawaiian, to see Palestinian brothers and sisters come to our aid in that moment and look me in the eye and say, our occupations are similar. Even though, from my vantage point, it's not as brutal here in Hawaii. It's not, but to have them still show up and say that and to learn about what's happening in my homeland and to stand with us when we protest all the way in California for Mauna Kea, that was really a big component to me. What are the connections between Hawaii and Palestine? Why do my Palestinian brothers and sisters see something that I don't? And how do I educate myself so I can get to be where they're at, in that same realm of solidarity, right? We have people who are displaced very violently from their homelands, who are, constantly undergoing genocide for the past 75 years. And for them to look me in the eye and to say that Hawaii and Palestine are the same, that's very meaningful and very touching. And
So that gives us some idea about how some people from SFJP have been involved, etc. So I would like to go to Ihilani, if you would say more about SFJP and the involvements and some of the events and some of your poetry performance as well would be beautiful and wonderful.
Great question, and thank you so much. To recap, SFJP at UH, Students and Faculty for Justice in Palestine at the University of Hawai'i, incredible org, like Cindy stated, started by her, alongside some amazing faculty and students. And there's many different ways that you could articulate the function of this group. But the way that I've seen it throughout the years, our core fundamentals are one, building pilina as in relationships with each other, bringing amazing Palestinian scholars, activists, artists to be in conversation with not just Kanaka Maoli, but folks in Hawaii. So there's like a cross-cultural connection and that education. And a lot of it is political education, whether it be at the university or on the streets of Ala Moana Boulevard in Atkinson. I feel like that intersection has been where we've been for years. But it's educating ourselves and then educating those around us about what's going on in Palestine. And that's always in a conversation of what's happening in Hawaii, because the two are so interconnected. And perhaps Kumu Cindy could speak to this a little bit later, but having Decolonial November, or sometimes it's in October or September, but building that pilina, building that relationship where Kanaka and Palestinians and folks from Hawaii are able, like Keone said in that earlier clip, to look each other in the eye and understand our struggles. But I think more than understanding our occupation or our relationship to imperialism, understanding our relationship to each other that's embedded in aloha aina, our love for place and our love for homeland. And I think that connection is able to be developed so seamlessly because we as Kanaka love Hawaii, like Palestinians love Palestine, regardless on both sides, if you're in diaspora or not. We're able to articulate that love and therefore able to fight for these different struggles that are so heavily interconnected and in more than one way the same. I think since October 7th, so almost a year ago, organizing the activism has looked a little differently. There have been a lot more rallies, I should say, a lot more cross-collaboration. Like we have Maui for Palestine, Kona for Palestine. So seeing these orgs and it not just being SFJP at UH anymore is a sign that this movement is healthy. There's political education going on, and it's not just happening within the university, within our communities in which we come from, and the conversations we're having with our friends and family. But going to art, and I'll try and keep this quick. And in summary, I actually only started doing music or poetry when it came to the movement to protect Mauna Kea. I was on Mauna Kea as a student through Pu'uhuluhulu University and at UH. And I turned to music through this awesome guy named Punahele Kutsin, who went on an exchange to Palestine with the Palestinian youth movement. And he taught me that hip hop and poetry can be a way to process how you're feeling and express your struggles in a creative way. And so when Sumaya Aoude, this incredible Palestinian scholar and activist, came to Hawaii for Decolonial November, myself, as well as my best friend Kowila Mahi, another hip hop artist, wanted to give her a makana or to give her a gift We could have made a lei, like a physical flowers or maybe even tea leaf, but we wanted to haku a lei of words. And so we wrote a rap that connected Pa'iaino Hawaii, or the Hawaiian archipelago, to Palestine. And it articulates both struggles, but it also talks about the love for both places. And if you're gonna love Hawaii, you have to love Hawaiians. And if you're gonna love, like the place in which you come from, it means being able to stand with somebody else and fight for their love for that land as well.
Olive tree to olive tree, we stand in solidarity. Ku'ana kapaya. From olive tree to olive tree, from Ni'ihau to Hawaii, we see you in your struggle and we won't stop till we're all free. Ku'ana kapaya. Intifada, intifada, intifada. Free your people, free your mind. Deoccupied Hawaii and Palestine.
But looking at art as a way to document that history, because that relationship isn't just in scholarly articles. It doesn't just happen on social media. This makana, this gift of this mele paleoleo, this rap, although it's a modern medium, Kanaka Maoli have been composing chants and songs for Palestine since the 18th century. So continuing that tradition of having mele be embedded in our not just political but personal relationship.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good information. So Palestine is not like anything new to the Hawaiian people. And I just want to say a couple of things because what you said is so rich and a lot of meanings. One is that exile, Palestinians feel exile in their own country. And the Hawaiians feel exiled in their own country, even though they still live here. And some of them are exiled in their own country, and when they go to the continent to try and eke out an existence, etc. So that's one thing. The other thing is the Palestine youth movement. And this is something that, in fact, Laila, we were talking about yesterday. And that was the question about the event. When is it going to happen? Will it happen on October 5th, like the Palestinian youth movement around the country? Or is it on the 6th or 7th, where it is would be the anniversary of the, October 7th? Intifada, Palestinian Intifada against oppression of 75 years. So, Laila, would you want to pick up on that, Palestinian youth movement?
Yeah, sure. We've tried because we're a small island and we're a small group. Like we've tried to plan our events in alignment with what's happening on the continent or happening on the other islands. So we're all following social media accounts. And if we see like a call to action or we see a group that's saying, Global Strike Day or saying, calling for people to support, our group kind of gets together and says, hey, do we have the capability? Could we join? Could we do it on this day? And we've done that with a lot of different things. So we had just seen that the Palestinian Youth Movement had planned an October 5th. So yesterday we have our meetings every week, a Zoom meeting where we get together and we sort of talk about an event that's happened, what went well, what could we do different, and then we plan what's going to happen, whether it's film screenings or we've done fundraisers, political discussions, rallies, vigils, political events. And so this, looking at our next events was maybe we could do something on the 5th of October, but we just kind of discussed that last night. But we we even, my son, who's 11, I have two sons. My 11-year-old son has come with us to some of the events. And, maybe there's not that, maybe there's 30 or 40 people, but then I've showed him, look, Manu, we're 30 or 40, but look, there's all these people, all across the globe in these big cities and, in all these different countries and all these different continents, and they're doing the same thing. So even though you look down and maybe you see 40 people, just know that we're part of this huge movement and, aligning with those dates kind of fortifies us. So, because sometimes we do feel a little isolated out here, we don't get a huge numbers. I think we got 100 people at our biggest rally and, that was great, but just so we do try to, when we can, just coordinate with the other groups just for our own, to promote it and just to make us feel like, yeah, we are part, we know we're not going to on our own stop this horrific genocide and this occupation, but we're like a piece and we can bring bring as much as we can to the movement. So we're thinking, we're thinking October 5th, but it's definitely in the planning.
Good. Cindy is thinking, she wrote it's going to be October 5th. But before I go to Cindy, I would like to go to a segment by Chris Castagna. And he's talking about Gaza, and that Gaza is a symptom, of what's happening, because he puts it in terms of international relations.
That Gaza is one symptom. Gaza really epitomizes a lot that is wrong with this broken capitalist system based on greed and militarism and racism. Gaza just epitomizes it and puts it in front of your face, and it's all happening at warp speed at a level 12 out of 10 on a 1 to 10 scale. But if we deal with Gaza today, if we get a ceasefire today, that's the systems that gave us this genocide. Those systems are still going to be there. And so it's about connecting our struggles and our lived realities to Gaza, understanding how we are connected, both in terms of how the struggles that we face in wherever we come from and wherever our people are from. Like I'm from the Caribbean, and gun violence is a big, huge problem there, and get to find out like one of the worst places for gun and gang violence is Haiti. And there's some Zionist Israelis that are running guns in Haiti, right? So to see some of the connections, right? The connections in struggles that we are facing, but also to see the connections in terms of how we also benefit from the capitalist system. And then to ask, what are we willing to give up? What privileges are we willing to forego, to sacrifice for the changing and downfall of the system? Asking some of those critical questions so that we move beyond just this instinctive activism that could sometimes come across and maybe be performance, right? Now, there's role for performance. There's a need for the protest and the sign waving because that gets people's attention. But when you get people's attention and you don't have anything to follow up with, then it fizzles out. And that's what we want to make sure doesn't happen.
Like Chris, we call him Chris, he's actually a chemistry teacher at Kamehameha on Maui. So he's doing a lot of good stuff, Before we go any further with Cindy, I want to show another segment by Alicia Higgins. She would say a few things about the events and other things that they've been doing on Maui. Connecting that also with the question of what Chris was talking about, which was basically, I asked him a question about the relationship between organizing, and being active. What's the difference between activism and organizing? So that was part of his response, the one we just saw.
We're doing fundraising. We have our Palestinian sister here, Palestine is her name, who makes amazing hummus, and we have a silent auction going right now online. We did an event called Dine for Palestine, which was a great cultural event. We learned the dabka and we ate some Palestinian food, so that was beautiful as well. And through fundraising, we've made over $10,000, and so we're really trying to continue that. We just want to help in any way that we can, and it feels, sometimes we feel so helpless, and so we want to redistribute the wealth here and bring it back to Gaza to help people rehabilitate from injuries or whatever, and in whatever way that we possibly can. So in terms of connections with other groups, SFJP there, we did join in on the divestment campaign when it first started. And so we tried to start something here at the UH campus on Maui. And we were out there tabling and talking about the demands for divestment from the university. I think the political education class is a great way to try and, connect the islands. It's on Zoom, so anybody, at our last meeting, we had folks from Oahu, folks from Kauai, and I'm not sure if we had Hilo there, but we even had Oregon. So it's a great way just to, if we can't be together in person necessarily, still talking to each other face to face through Zoom is a great way to just strengthen that community, get to know each other, share ideas.
Yeah, Cindy, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll talk about some of the work that SFJP is doing. As Ihilani mentioned, we have been committed to bringing out Palestinian speakers, poets, organizers at least once a year. Last year, we actually had Malak Matar, the young artist from Gaza, come in October. And as she spoke, her family was under direct bombardment. And that was a very powerful and moving visit for us, where she shared her art with us and also her experiences growing up in Gaza. We also had Shireen Saikali come in March and talk about the work that she does, that is kind of archival work. And so I think those, as Ihilani said, those SFJP visits have been really important in building connections and a common conversation. Projects have come out of that. Sarah Imud, one of our visitors, is working on a project with Ali Musle, who they're going to be teaching a class here in the summer of 2025 that came out of Sarah's visit here. So a lot of things have come out of those visits. I do also want to pick up on this issue of divestment that we just heard a little bit about. So as Ihilani mentioned, our work has really picked up and changed since October 2023. And one of the things that we are working on now is a kind of 6-point set of demands to the UH administration. One is to disclose and divest. The other is to boycott and adhere to the Palestinian academic and cultural boycott of Israel guidelines. And I could say more about that, but it involves ending independent self-designated or self-designed study abroad programs in Israel, as well as canceling the strategic partnership with Israel. Another is solidarity, a statement supporting a permanent and lasting ceasefire and affirming the right of Palestinian people to national liberation and right of return. Another is to terminate the UARC or the contract as part of a demilitarization project. And Ibrahim, you know very well about our goal of providing funding for, or getting the admin to agree to funding for a tenure-line faculty position in West Asia and Arab diaspora studies with a focus on Palestine studies to be housed in ethnic studies. We're also looking at bringing some Gaza students to UH, a cohort of them, and then also to protect UH students and workers under attack for criticizing Israel or supporting Palestine liberation. And, I think that that's also an important kind of proactive thing to be doing, given what is going on across the country in terms of the vicious repression of Palestine activism.
Yeah. I want to go to Jessica. If you would comment on what you have seen with Alicia, Ihilani, Laila, Cindy, and what else could you add to those things in terms of your views on the Gaza situation or the rest of it?
Thank you. Well, it was great to hear from Chris and Alicia. They are just a powerhouse, honestly. And when we formed in December, it was kind of Chris who got us to collect all of the names, and Alicia was really encouraging us to, create. First we were on WhatsApp, now we're on Signal, but just a way to be connected, because I think for the first month between October and November, a lot of us were feeling like, is it just me? Like, am I the only one who's feeling this way and seeing what's going on? So it was amazing to kind of find each other, and we knew that we wanted to connect and to do more. Alicia did a great job covering a lot of our events, and I think Laila mentioned some of them. We've been doing our fundraising. And one of our ongoing series that we've been doing is our film screenings. So one of the first films we did was actually on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We showed The Tale of Three Jewels, which is a fictional film set in Gaza. And we tried to make the connection between Martin Luther King Jr.'s work, which was obviously the civil rights movement, but then later he also was very anti-war during the Vietnam War at that time. So we showed some of those clips. And I think something that we've been trying to do is to just make those connections, those intersectionality pieces. So whether it's between, the civil rights movement or the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, we had an event on Prince Kuhio Day to call attention to the connections between the occupation of Hawaii and the occupation of Palestine. So just trying to take those opportunities as they arise. We've also tried to do community outreach. So we've been at like the farmers markets, doing tabling and handing out flyers. We were at an Earth Day event. So we are a small group on a small island. So we try to maximize our presence, like, okay, where are folks going to be? And how can we just spread the word about what we're doing? The other thing that we've been doing is, Laila mentioned, being part of the national and even international days of action. The first one we did was April 15th, which was kind of a Stop the World for Gaza Day. So we were out at Kahului Harbor with our signs, and I love that even though we are a small group, we've kind of been making waves. So people in the community are hearing about what we're doing, and we actually got some coverage in Al Jazeera for that. Our action was featured in that collection. The other one was the Not Another Bomb campaign that was pretty recent before the DNC. So we sent in our photos. And like Laila mentioned, I think it's just important for us to be mindful of the way we're connected to the larger movement for our own strength and to give us hope, and just to amplify that we're not alone and we can all support each other.
Okay, thank you. I want to go to another segment by Keone Rodriguez. I asked him to explain more about the relationship between Hawaii and Palestine.
In the Hawaiian community, we are very blessed to have a really large cadre of scholars that have really propelled a lot of the activism that we've seen in the past half a century. And, some of these, really notable figures like Muhammad Trask, Ihilani Kalanui, have made those connections between Hawaii and Palestine for decades. And we've seen Hawaiians traveling to Palestine, and we've seen Palestinians traveling to Hawaii. During Maui, there was a Palestinian contingent that came to make offerings, and so these connections have been there within our lifetime, and maybe even longer, as some of my peers have reminded us. Some of the first Hawaiian maps that were made at the Haina Seminary are depicting Palestine, and we're very grateful and lucky that Kalila Mahi, was one of those people that is continuing to uncover those links. So, in terms of that level of relationship, in terms of the acknowledgement that, in terms of recognition, Hawaii and Palestine are connected and continue to be. But the reality is there's also a material component as well. An analysis of what's happening with the occupation of both Hawaii and Israel is imperialism that connects both these things, the exploitation of land and people for resources. And we can see that the connections that capital has made between Hawaii in terms of the way that the military is one of the largest sectors of the GDP, and how those military capabilities that are honed here in Hawaii are being used by the IDF and in tandem with the United States to commit genocide upon the Palestinians. There's a direct link, and we just saw that with RIMPAC, where the Israeli military was invited by the United States military to come to Hawaii to do quote-unquote war games, right? And there are many more other countries that are implicated in that. And so every 2 years, we can see very directly the connections that Hawaii and Israel are sort of having without the Hawaiian people's consent. As Hawaiians have been resisting military occupation, and that includes the ability for the Israeli military, along with other reactionary militaries across the globe, to hone their lethality and their brutality that Hawaiians Maui are not the primary recipients of, but we are implicated in that, right? When Israeli military comes to practice on our Aina, we see Aina as our ancestor, as our relative, right? And so, basically they're inviting someone into our house to practice to go kill our brothers and sisters in Palestine.
Yeah, that's very important. So I want to go to another segment by Alicia Higgins, who talks about RIMPAC.
The Council RIMPAC coalition in Hawaii was kind of started to coalesce in maybe a different way than it had in the past, because Israel was going to be, the IDF was going to be in Hawaii. So we wanted to make a strong statement, not only to get out of Hawaii, but also, the IDF are not welcome here. So Aoude RIMPAC, Aoude IDF, so the coalition had a few meetings, and I was repping for Maui for Palestine, and we did a couple months of events, and we made sure and let everyone know through our social media what the different events are that they can attend. One that we did here in particular, Maui for Palestine, did a July 4th Interdependence Day action, which was like a car caravan, and then we went to the west side, and there we spoke with Gretchen, who was a representative of Lahaina Strong, and we spoke about the interdependence of our struggles, the Palestinian struggle, the Hawaiian struggle, what they're doing in Lahaina, or what they have been doing, and what they did, and what they were able to achieve, and how to organize, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's really important, the question of RIMPAC, etc., because, it's not like exercises to defend the free world. It's like to go and commit genocide in Gaza, to commit genocide in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the list goes on, genocide in Vietnam before, and all of that. That was even before RIMPAC. Be that as it may, the fact of the matter, like the imperial beast is out there, and coming to take advantage of Hawaiian waters to do that kind of thing, which is genocide across the world whenever they can. So just, maybe like Ihilani, if you would talk about, genocide, RIMPAC relationship, your comments on what Keone said, what Alicia, and we go from there.
Keone and Alicia covered things really well, but in summary, RIMPAC, Rim of the Pacific, it's the largest military war games in the entire world, taking place mostly in Hawaii, but other parts of the Pacific region. So we have cousins in Alaska as well, different tribes who are experiencing that same type of violence, and making that connection between RIMPAC, Hawaii, and Palestine. These military war games and these exercises, many of which done at Pohakuloa, which is a large military training base on Hawaii Island, and even off the shores of Oahu, but also Hawaii Island. The technology that's tested in Hawaii that physically harms our Aina is then used in a huge arms trade, and a huge arms deal that used to take place at the Hawaii Convention Center and has since been moved to an unknown location. Those weapons are then bought and sold largely by the US, folks like Lockheed Martin, whose Pacific headquarters are just miles from UH, to then be sold to the IDF, to Israel, using US tax dollars, because a lot of these trades are coming from the United States. Like, US is the largest weapons importer to Israel, but those weapons, and a lot of those weapons also being technology, like surveillance technology, are being tested in Hawaii, causing harm to our Aina, and then physically causing harm to Palestinians, their Aina, and those people as well. So although it may seem so far-fetched, geographically speaking, the connection is incredibly, incredibly intimate. And Kumu Cindy talked about this as well. Part of what we're trying to do is highlight how the University of Hawaii has always been implicated with the US military and causing harm in Hawaii, but specifically the relationship that they have through UARC and also Israel as well. We're talking about Hawaii being one of the most militarized places in the quote-unquote US, but what they do with their militarization efforts are without a doubt connected to Palestine, places like Afghanistan and Iraq, like you've said as well. But yeah, you can't talk about demilitarizing Hawaii. You can't talk about RIMPAC without talking about Palestine. And I think even just briefly stating, going beyond militarization and RIMPAC, talking about capitalism, something that was mentioned in a clip before, you have huge Zionist billionaires, Larry Ellison, who own 98% of one of our major islands, Lanai, and he uses that site as well for agriculture development, but also surveillance testing technology for his own private lands. But he's the CEO of Oracle, which is a huge like information system and surveillance group that's based out of Israel. So when we're thinking about not just the US military, but billionaire Zionists and what they're able to do in Hawaii, you can't separate that connection from not just militarization, but class and how folks are racialized both here in Hawaii and Palestine.
Yeah, there's also Zuckerberg and the rest of them. But Laila, could you, because there were some discussion or information about the educational program like on Maui. I know at SFJP would ask also Cindy to comment on that after you regarding a book club, and you were discussing books before that and so on, showing movies, etc. So all these things to raise consciousness and to give information to people. So could you say something more about it, Laila, from your vantage point on
Yeah,
Maui?
I mean, a lot of our kind of goal has been to educate people, that this is going on, and to let people know how much money is going each year of their tax dollars to fund Israel's military. I mean, one of our first signs that we made, we said, fund Lahaina, not genocide. And that's kind of been something that we've continued to repeat, because here we are on an island, that's gone through this devastating fire. And, why is the money going to the Israeli military to bomb innocent civilians, to bomb aid workers, journalists, schools, hospitals, instead of being invested in our communities? And that was a way we thought, we could try to draw people in to say, look, these are your tax dollars. Do you support $3 billion a year going to Israel to kill innocent civilians? And we just keep thinking, if we let people know, they'll come on board with us, So we've done a lot with movies, and we also, wanted to get people politically involved. So we definitely followed some of the campaigns like the Hawaii ceasefire resolution. We jumped on board with that. We got our members to be calling, daily and submitting testimony. We saw what people were doing on the continent as far as disrupting political events. And I think I speak for our group. I don't think any of us had been to a town hall meeting before. And maybe it was a couple days before we saw that our rep, Jill, and it was like, okay, well, should we go? Let's make our presence known. And we sort of, created this document, this shared document, and all these different points we wanted to make. And, we met in the parking lot, we spread out, and it was, to just kind of let Jill Takuda know, here, there's people here in Maui that do not want our tax dollars, hard-earned tax dollars, to go to fund this genocide. And what was interesting about that meeting is we decided, okay, well, we kind of know who each other are, so we'll spread out, but we also, of course, want to give space for anyone from Lahaina. We don't want to silence anybody else. We don't want to, be so dominant that we're stepping on people's shoes, or we're not allowing for other voices. So we said, well, we know who we are, so we'll stand up and have a question, and then we'll let somebody that we don't know have a question. And basically, the first question that came from somebody outside of our group was somebody from Lahaina whose school burned down, who called out Jill Takuta, our rep, to say, when my school and my house burned down, you were actually on a trip to Israel sponsored by AIPAC. And all of us kind of looked at each other like, who's this guy, right? Like, he didn't come with us, and he's got the same message. And it was just so powerful. So I guess I forget what your question was. Education, we keep thinking, and this is what I keep thinking too, like, if people knew what was going on, if people knew how many, billions of dollars we're sending to Israel, if people knew how many children have been slaughtered, every mother, every auntie, every teacher is going to join us, because this injustice is so grave. It's so blatant. It's so obvious in every single way. If they knew, they'd join us. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, because, we keep promoting, we keep educating, and, we want everybody to join us. We want the whole world to stand up and say, stop this genocide, end this occupation, free Palestine. That's our goal.
Yeah, wonderful. Cindy, could you say more about what you're doing? Could you say something more about what has been discussed so far, and what you might want to add to that from your vantage point, of course?
Well, I think that one of the, most important things SFJP has been doing over the years is providing education. And I think and through book clubs, through movie nights, through discussions, and through, our visitors who have come and educated us on various things. And I think that, the Palestinian voices are so silenced and censured, as well as, lives are eradicated, as we're seeing. And so I think that to make those narratives present is absolutely crucial. If you're just going to rely on the New York Times for your news, which people think of as a reputable source, you're just going to think that Palestinians are a bunch of terrorists, and that somehow they are mysteriously starving and they are mysteriously vanishing. And so education then becomes a very important thing. And I think it's especially important because I think Ali Abu Nima said this when he wrote The Battle for Justice in Palestine, or The Struggles for Justice in Palestine, that it's a battle of narrative. And to counter this idea that Jews and Israelis are one and the same, that Israelis are victims, and the whole, let's look at IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. I actually personally refuse to say that unless it is, I'm reading something where it's a quote, because there's nothing defensive about the IDF. They are an Israeli occupying army. And I think that, to assert that, you have to educate people. When we watched Gaza Mon Amour last week, I think that film is important because it provides a context for what has happened on October 7, 2023, which mainstream media would have us believe is where all this started. Mm-hmm. As opposed to Gaza being under siege and blockade since 2007 and under a settler colonial regime for, before 1948. And so I think this is really important. And I think it's especially urgent right now, where I actually was just reading about the work that the Hillel International is doing. They have something called Operation Secure Our Campuses. And they're bringing in the FBI and what they call security professionals and intelligence analysts to engage in what they call proactive planning to ensure the safety of Jewish students. And they're really ramping people up to think that Jewish students are going to be under threat of death on October 7, as this kind of extension of Palestinian terrorism on US campuses, when, if you're educated, you know what a lie this is, and actually that a lot of anti-Zionist Jews are being directly threatened by Hillel International, and by the ADL and these other Zionist groups. So I think education has an extremely important role to play. And also, you just can't speak out about Palestine if you don't have your facts lined up, because there's so many lies that you would otherwise just you'd be steamrolled over with all the lies that are told.
Yeah. I want to go to the last segment that Chris Castagni talked about. It's just a couple of minutes, and then we wrap up everything.
A metaphor that comes from a book by Domhilda Kamara, and it's from a book called The Desert is Fertile. Domhilda Kamara was an archbishop in Brazil. He was the one who, he said, when I feed the poor, they call me a saint, and when I ask why the poor are hungry, they call me a communist. And he wrote this book called The Desert is Fertile, and he spoke about the desert as a metaphor for the places and periods when it seems like it's barren, when it seems like nothing is happening, when it seems like there's no life. And he spoke about how fertile the desert is and how under the right conditions, like for example, when a rain comes and you get the wildflowers blooming, like in California, even in the Sahara, that happens, right? Just how much life there is in the desert. And for that life to be there has to be nutrients there in the soil that we don't see, but also the vegetation, the animals and plants that live in the desert have to be so resilient that a place that seems so barren, right? What they do is the vegetation there is resourceful by evolution. So the roots go so deep and they've come up with different ways to store water. And so if we take that metaphor and apply it to a movement, these periods when we see, even if it's like periods in between protests, when we see like it feels like nothing is happening, it feels like we're making no progress. These are the times when we have to make sure that we're cultivating our community so that we are doing like those plants in the desert and sending the roots deep and being resilient like the Palestinian people and finding ways to still survive so that when the right conditions come, as Kearney is saying, when the right conditions come, we get the masses, we get the people out in the streets because we have used that apparently barren time and period and space to actually lay that foundation.
Yeah, that's the idea behind like education and organizing at the same time. Yeah. So let's say, Jessica, could you kind of wrap up in terms of what you would like to say?
I would say that as a relatively new organizer and someone who's relatively new to advocating into the movement, I just take a lot of strength and inspiration from folks like yourself and Cindy, people who have been doing this for so long and who have so much knowledge about these issues. It can feel overwhelming. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot you feel like you don't know, and there's a lot of powers and forces that are at play. But taking a lot of strength from folks who have been doing this a long time and knowing that, it's patience, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And we just keep that vision that Palestine will be free.
All right, thank you. Ihilani, please.
Mahalo everyone for your manaʻo and spending time together today. The last thing that I want to end with is really thinking about how we can get our communities, myself specifically, like outside of the university, to think about and fight for Palestine. And for me, the most difficult conversations that I've had is getting my own ohana or my own family to care. And it's hard because if you don't have a grasp on like not just international relations, but global politics, it might be a little bit hard to feel like, oh, why should I care about Palestine? But for me, the most fruitful conversation I think I've had in the last year with my family in talking about Palestine, because everything that they're getting is from the news, from KHON, CNN, and like honestly Fox. And I was sitting down with my parents and saying, do you remember in 2019 when they called Hawaiians on Mauna Kea drunkards and belligerent and protesters, the same way that Kanaka Maoli have been talked about for fighting for Mauna Kea, for fighting to end the lease with Pohakuloa, everything that has been said about Hawaiians on our Aina when we try to protect something, how they talk about you, mom and dad, that's how they're framing Palestinians. And I think for them, and even my siblings as well, having that framing of understanding, like that battle for the narrative. So getting back into our communities and getting back into our families. Like once you know the history of Hawaii, then you're better equipped to understand the history of other colonized and occupied places. So yeah, going back to that battle of the narrative, and I think our kuleana, our responsibility, is to reclaim that and to know our own mo'olelo because it makes us stronger across the world. Thank you.
Laila, please.
I wake up thinking about Gaza and I go to sleep thinking about Gaza. Sometimes it feels lonely, you know. I'm at work all day. I wear my keffiyeh, you know, I'm around people. They know what I'm about and what I stand for. But it's so wonderful to know that I'm not alone, that there's other people that are willing to spend the time to work together to do whatever we can do, you know, whether it's amplifying voices on social media, whether it's calling our reps, whether it's rallies, postcards, movie nights, fundraising, because whether I'm working on it with other people or not, I'm going to be thinking about Gaza. And so I'd rather feel like I'm thinking about it and I'm doing some small thing to change it. You know, I'd rather be a little bit of light than just condemn this darkness over and over again. So I invite you to join us.
Thank you. I just want to say that the question of the narrative is very important, as Ihilani was talking about everyone, actually. The thing is that this thing about Judaism is like Semitism. If you are against Israel, you're anti-Semit, anti-Jewish. That's a very strong point for the Zionists, but also a weak link that we can cut through, you know. That's one thing. And then a lot of stuff organizing to counter what the Hillel is doing and other organizations. So please go ahead.
It's just been a pleasure to be in conversation with everybody because it can be very hopeless to just watch a live stream genocide. And so the work that we all do with each other is for ourselves as well as, you know, for Gaza. And I think of Palestine solidarity work as work that I do for myself too, because how can you feel okay about yourself as a human being if you are watching what is happening and not doing anything, however small it is? And then I would also just say that, you know, please be on the watch for for October 5th. We will be with all our sibling orgs mobilizing. And also you can follow SFJP on Instagram at SFJPUH to stay abreast of what we're doing and also what other groups are doing, because we're all in conversation with each other and we're all boosting each other's posts. And, you know, it's great to have a sibling org as part of this show. And so thank you for making this happen, Ibrahim, and thank you to my friends on the show.
No, I thought that is important to connect Maui with, Oahu, but also to begin connecting more Kauai and, Big Island, Kona, Hilo, and all of that. So maybe that's one thing to work on. And I just want to say this, like I said it in the beginning of the thing. I don't know if Cindy remembers. Said this is a long haul struggle. You know, it's not like gonna end in 1 month, 2 months, etc. And it might take several years, still. So we have to be strong, and not only I'm talking about Gaza, like takes several years, but the question of Palestine and also the question of settler colonialism, and the question of also global capitalism and how you can try and defang it if you can. So all of this depends upon us and what we do. Thank you all for doing this. It's very wonderful, and I'm glad you shared this time with Island Connections. So mahalo nui loa for viewers, and so mahalo nui loa all. Aloha.